Greetings. This is Caroline Staten with Transition US, and thank you so much for joining us today. Our principal aim in providing these teleseminars is to offer practical support to the leaders of transition initiatives, those who are considering starting an initiative in your community, and leaders all across the nation and in other countries as well who are really focused on building resilience within their communities. So these events are for all of you. And we would like to continue to offer these at no cost, and do ask that you consider making a donation at transitionus.org. And just a big heart-filled thank you to those of you who can support us in this way. So without further ado, wanted to dive in now into our conference. And today it's on the Maestro Platform Conference, which is an audio platform. And we'll be asking you to press 1 or 2 on your keypads to enter into the discussions that we'll be having a little later on in this call. And this event today is called Building Leaderful Communities, Capacities and Practices to Support Thriving Transition, and I want to say resilient building communities as well. So building leaderful communities, so what does that take? People everywhere yearn for thriving and vibrant community, and most of us recognize that this requires leadership from all of us, and not just 1 or 2. What helps to create this kind of shared leadership and support thriving movements, well, that's what we'll be hearing about today. Our guest presenter is Tenneson Woolf. He is a facilitator, a workshop leader, speaker, and writer. He has 20-plus years experience designing and leading meetings in participative formats, utilizing open space, circle, and World Cafe. He worked for many years with Margaret Wheatley at the Burkina Institute and has really helped people be smarter together and to get people interacting with each other, learning together, building relationships, and focusing on projects takes some work and some really good exercises. And we'll really hear some of those exercises today from Tenneson and things that you can implement in your groups to help them work more effectively. So without further ado, Tenneson, thank you so much for joining us today, and take it away.
Thanks, Caroline. So hello, everyone. I think I'll offer a few words here to shape up some of what will happen here today. And the first thing that I need to offer is that some of you were expecting Jeff Aitken to be on the call today, and he and I have planned this out together and been in some good conversations with one another and good questions with one another, and it's been really fun to do. And Jeff ran into some health challenges last night, kidney stones, and was just not able to join us for today. So I feel sad that Jeff is not here, and yet grateful for his friendship and companionship because it's been fun and sparky. There's a chance that Jeff might be listening, and if Jeff you are, I'm just saying hello to you with a gratitude. I'll offer a couple of additional things of setup, and then there will be some periods where we break and pause and invite some stories or bits of stories from you who are on the call. One of the pieces that I relate to, Caroline, in what you just spoke is that there is a question about how to create leaderful communities. And if I back that up even one more step, something about leadership, what is leadership and what is leaderful, there are many ways that we could play with that, and some of you might have some favorites. For purposes of our talking today, I just want to add a couple biases in. One is that I come from this background, as Caroline mentioned, of the Berkana Institute and some of the work with Margaret Wheatley and colleagues. There we had a definition of leadership or leader as anyone who wants to help. And I find that that's a very freeing definition for people. I've been doing some work recently with a church community in Iowa, and they're kind of gathering together people to be on a core team to steward some strategic discernment over a 6 to 8 month period. And they've invited some people to come onto that team and apply to be on that team, get some statements of interest and expression. And one of the things that really freed the unusual suspect, if you will, to participate in that was defining leadership so broadly. A leader is anyone who wants to help. Leaderful, if I go into that for a minute, there's just a big question that's here about how do we create environments where it feels like many people are contributing, or where we have a culture with one another that people feel free to contribute in and offer their talents or offer their skills or offer their curiosities, all of these kind of things. As Caroline spoke from the introduction, most of us relate to being in some complex environments and the idea that not any one of us can figure out everything that's going on there, and thus fit into an older model of leadership, of knowing everything and being able to take care of everything. So the desire and the invitation to be in more leaderful ways with one another, more peer-based leadership with one another, I think is widely sought after by people. If I bring that back into thriving transition efforts, resilience communities, I love it that the piece that you spoke, Caroline, also the Transition Streets program or community program is happening tomorrow, and I'm going to try to join that actually to listen in. I think most of us are seeking in the day-to-day to be in ways that feel energizing together, sustainable together, in good community with one another. Some of us are really committed to specific projects and plans. I was with a fellow last night who helped start a bike sharing program in Salt Lake City, which is near where I live, called Green Bike. And we got to talking last night a little bit about what it takes to support a community of people being together in these leaderful ways or more leaderful ways. So many of us are holding that kind of question. There's another piece that I want to bring in, and then I'm going to bring Jeff back into the phone call. One is that through a colleague and friend of mine, Bob Stilger, he and I have been in several conversations lately, and one thread or theme that continues to come up is about how the future is unknowable and how do we thrive in an unknowable future. This all connects back into Leaderful. I think the idea is if we can create more capacity with one another and more culture of spontaneous offerings of leadership, we're doing pretty well. Earlier this week when Jeff and I were talking, the overall framing that came out of this is that if we want to make leaderful communities, it asks for a lot of our attention, and it asks us for our time and for our patience and for our nurturing. And that in so doing, there's a few maps that we can offer, and that's the point of the phone call, the teleconference here today, is to offer a few frameworks and a few practices that can help support what you're either already doing in a leaderful way or what you want to do and what you want to support. When Jeff and I talked, I suppose a week ago, we got on the phone and we were starting to plan this teleseminar. And both of us were coming from fairly busy days, just settling down into our desks and our chairs at tables. And I suppose there was a little bit of an air that both of us felt like, okay, we better get into planning what this seminar is going to be beyond the description that was in the invitation and the announcement. And as Jeff and I talked, our habit and pattern with each other is that we'll stop and pause for a check-in. How are you in the day? And sometimes that, of course, moves into more specific things about the planning that we're doing. But Jeff and I, when we talked that day, we both said, you know what? Jeff is the one that said this, actually. I'd really like to do is just be quiet for a little bit. And he talked a little bit more after that. And then I came back to it with him and I said, you know, I'm okay with being quiet. Do you want to be quiet for a while? And we did. We actually sat for 3 or 4 minutes together. It was a short time. But in that 3 or 4 minutes of silence and pause, it actually ended up reshaping, I believe, how we talked with one another that day. The connection that I want to make is that this silencing, this being able to be in silence, even just for short times in this contemporary, relatively speedy culture that we live in, can be such a massive gift and can be very, very centering and very, very clearing. There's some resources from pieces that I've been reading on silence, actually, and one of them is a book by Robert Sardello, and the book is called Silence, the Mystery of Wholeness, and he says, silence is autonomous and it's beyond us. Our task is to coordinate our being with the greater being of silence. And some of you might relate to that in a meditative way, and some of you might relate to that in an aha kind of way. But as an invitation for today, just starting out as you think about what leaderful means to you or what it could mean, I want to invite just a short period of silence to go into just thinking about those things. And then from there, we'll come out and we've got 3 main chunks to offer in the context of this teleseminar that Jeff and I created together. We'll go into those in a bit, but for now, just start with that silence. And I'll time it, Caroline, so that just when we come out of it, I'll start speaking again. So wherever you are, some of you may be in places where it's a little trickier to do this, but to the best of your ability, just center in and settle in for a minute. We're just going to go for a couple of minutes. Thank you. One of the teachers that I really value in my life and friend and colleague that some of you may be aware of is Christina Baldwin, who was co-author of The Circle Way and has written a few other pieces on Circle through her organization, Pure Spirit. And when we were talking one day about silence, she said that in contemporary culture, 15 seconds of silence can be profound. I'm glad to have just a little bit of silence. Later, we'll invite some of you to speak from that silence into some of the stories that you know or some of the questions that you know. The first piece that I want to focus on for this morning is something called the Fourfold Practice. It comes from the Art of Hosting community of practitioners and some other many contributions along the way now. Some of you will be familiar with this. There have been people on these teleseminars that have spoken to some of this before, and it itself would be, would be worth a very much longer conversation together. The basic gist of the Fourfold Practice is 4 aspects of helping to develop capacity to be in good connection and in good conversation with one another. And at one level, what I like in this particular framing and model is that it moves us from the experience of being individual learners into the experience and culture of becoming a community of learners And then lastly, into the experience and culture of becoming a community that learns. I like that distinction between a community of learners, lots of us doing good, cool things, and a community that learns. In other words, faces an unknowable future together and commits itself to being in learning with one another. These are all qualities, again, that I would suggest are really important to pay attention to as it pertains to creating leaderful cultures. Within this particular way of looking and seeing, there are four focus areas. The first is to be present. The second is to practice conversation, to be in conversation and participate. The third is to host conversation. And the last is to co-create or support a community of practitioners. All of these feel important, and at some level, I'll just touch lightly on each of them. The one that I want to stay on a little bit more today is being present. So in the jumping ahead way, there are some times when we just jump into conversation. You may have some, in different forms, circles, appreciative inquiry, open space groups, world cafes. What I've found with the participating in conversations, the ability to participate and be with one another, that there's of course some key guidelines and key values. And the ones that I think I keep going back to are that in any of those places, as we come into sort of develop our capacity to show up and be with other people in a conversational way, that listening with attention is one aspect of that. Speaking with intention, speaking just as simply as we can, the truth that we know, is another aspect of that. And welcoming surprise or what emerges from participating in a conversation is a big deal. Like that's the piece where we can say, being together is different and more than being alone. Important things happen, and how I show up to participate in those conversations makes a difference. That's something that we practice or want to get good at. Hosting conversations is sort of next on the wheel there. There are times when we move our work, and many of you are likely involved in this, to actually hosting people in the conversations. I love the reference point that is becoming much more common now of leader as host instead of leader as hero. And the idea that in leader as host, we're setting containers sometimes for people to be in interaction and engagement with one another. And sometimes that's a methodology, and sometimes that may be another form. We're using various listening tools so that we can tap into the wisdom of what's in the group. If I try to anchor that back again just for a moment into Leaderful, I think one of our jobs is to get good at creating containers or hosting opportunities for more of the talent in the room to become visible or more to become witnessed with one another. Last night, a meeting that I was at was involved with the Impact Hub people in Salt Lake who are just into a new building, and I got to, they're probably a year and a half old, I think, in this area. And they're friends of mine, so I got to go up and participate and also host them in a World Cafe last night, which in short was focused on what is it that you value most about this Impact Hub, and also what is it that you need to help make your dreams real or the dream of this hub real. Something about, in the first conversation about what you value, really brought out the desire from these people, and these are really strong entrepreneurial types. They get it that being together is different than being alone, but they also get it that there's one comment from a guy that was there that I loved. He said, in being together, I feel like a less lonely Lone Ranger. There's something funny to me in that about just inviting the welcome or welcoming the space of being together. the hosting the conversations part, sometimes when we witness each other, which is what was happening last night, just hearing some of our genuine desires actually brings out the leader qualities in one another, or the desire or the anticipation or the imagination even sometimes. I feel like in hosting spaces for that kind of engagement and interaction, good stuff happens. The last one on the wheel here is around the community of practitioners. And to me, this is like being able to be with one another where emergence or surprise or aha can happen at scale with one another. To me, this ties into community of practice work where sometimes we hold specific commitments and interests with one another that we've agreed to stay in. And I know that there's a whole pile of these from being with some transition communities and resilience communities. So those are all important things to pay attention to. I want to come back to the basic presence one. And some of this for me, basic presence in creating the opportunity for leaderful community. Some of this comes back to the awareness that in day-to-day, everyday life, many of us are quite harried. We have a lot of stuff on our plates. We have things that we want to accomplish. And we come into meetings sometimes leaking out to the meeting that, or leaking from the meeting that we just came from, and maybe even sometimes leaking into the meeting that we're going to be going into next. Excuse me. Our ability, I would suggest, to be present with self, which is an awfully honest thing to do, tricky sometimes, I believe, present to each other, can we be free of distraction? And it won't be this way all of the time, and maybe never perfect either, but can we get better at it? And can we be present to the whole? In other words, what is it that's possible to come through us that is not possible to come through at an individual level? I notice that the more that I'm able to show up in a very present way, grounded, clear, something like that, the more likely it is that the people that I'm with, the groups that I'm with, are able to find that present place in them, or that calm place in them, or that grounded place in them. So there's something about presence that I've been speaking over the last year or so as a core competency. I love the language of competencies, and usually that's reserved more for business kinds of settings. And the idea that presence itself is a competency, and in fact a core competency, so that we can be in more leaderful spaces with one another, that's pretty freaking appealing and pretty promising, linking it back to transition, so that we can accomplish the kinds of things that we really care about. That's a bit. I think I'm going to stop and pause with this one. And as before, go into a deliberate period of silence, 2 minutes. And from that silence, I want to invite 2 or 3 stories that come from you. And these are stories that are more like the 45 seconds to 1 minute version, or the partial story that's there. And the question that I'll invite you to think on is, when have you experienced presence that helps to create a leaderful environment for you? When have you experienced presence that helps to create a leaderful environment for you? Or when have you experienced it that helps to create that leaderful environment? I'll watch the timer again here, and when it's done, Caroline, I'll invite you to welcome the hands, okay? couple of stories. When have you experienced presence? And what's that got to do with leaderful community? We have some stories.
I'll invite people to press 1 on their keypad and not take too long with relaying the story so we can hear from more people. So press 1 on your phone keypad to relay a story. Suzanne, go ahead. Suzanne, you're still in the silence.
Oh, okay. No, I'm here.
Oh, good.
The story that comes to my mind is when I was engaged in a conversation with a therapist, and I noticed when I talked with her, her eyes were like large, so to speak, like she really was interested in what it was I was saying, and my sense was that she, by her presence to me, brought out the qualities, the positive qualities, which I thought, I didn't realize I had in a sense, and it gave me more confidence. So I think the same thing happens in a meeting, is when we truly listen and are present to each other, then people are brought forth in a holistic sense.
Cool.
Here's Carolyn Treadway as well. Go ahead, Carolyn.
Okay, hello. I was privileged to go on the learning journey led by Bob Stilger to Japan and to the disaster areas of the earthquakes, radiation, and tsunami. And we went to listen, and listening to the people, the survivors, in event after event, group after group, was extremely profound. And we then left them, so I can't say what happened to them, although I know they were impacted and said so again and again by our coming half a world away to listen to them. But our group was very impacted, and I am now giving slideshow presentations about this journey. And the thing that I emphasize is the wisdom of these people, and that their stories that need to be heard by the world contain so much wisdom for all of us. And in a way, I'm taking a leadership role by going around and giving these presentations that brought leadership forth in me. But I think that the very act of, as the person ahead of me, Susanna, just said, the listening, the profound listening of somebody brings something forth in both the speaker and the listener. Thank you.
Thank you. So again, if others want to contribute and share a story, press 1 on your keypad. Not seeing any others at the moment, Tenneson, so back to you.
Good. Thank you, Suzanne and Carolyn, for sharing those. To me, what I hear in those stories is in the listening and large eyes, attentive eyes of the therapist, that it's actually giving you courage, or gives us courage in those circumstances. And in Japan also, thriving amidst disaster, and how that was themed as a learning journey. There's something utterly, there's something in the story, or the bit of the story that you're sharing, Carolyn, that I relate to. Of course, visiting doesn't fix everything, and maybe that's not the point, or it isn't the point, but it does give the people there, as well as you who are on the journey, the opportunity to be in some very, very real and significant sharing with each other and witnessing with each other, that kind of presence, if I loop it back to there, I believe helps to bring out leaderful qualities or leadership qualities among the many that are being heard. And I think that's what we're trying to do in relation to many of the transition efforts that are happening. I mean, people come with a lot of, in my experience, people come with a lot of passion and sometimes a lot of fire, and sometimes a lot of fire that's actually tricky to be with. It's great that it's there. And if the intent for us is to build or to hold the energy of a movement, of a culture-making, world-transformed movement in relation to energy, sustainability, and by the way, all the community that goes with that, that's part of the bigger story for me. Then us being able to witness just the human-to-humanness of witnessing each other in what's real for each other, it pulls out more of the best of our abilities. That's pretty cool stuff. Let me shift attention into a second piece, and this is around Angeles Arian and the Fourfold Way. So we're going from Fourfold Practice, a well-used reference point within the Art of Hosting community, to this beautiful piece by Angeles Arian, the Fourfold Way. And I never met Angeles in person, but she's one of those people that I think among my friends and colleagues, among my friends and colleagues and people that I love and trust, Angeles was one of those people that was probably most often referenced, people telling me how much they loved her work. I'm also the kind of person that feels that I really, really look for the simplicity of things. So with awareness that our lives themselves may not necessarily be simple, or the efforts and initiatives that we're that we're in may not be particularly simple. Being able to, are complex, let's say, being able to find some simplicity about what to do within that is golden, is a gem, is the work of elders. And when I say elders, it's got to be in all of us. I'm told about Angeles that she was a person that really trusted mystery and what comes from the silence. And she showed up with these 4 bits that Jeff actually provided, and I want to speak into our call today and speak a little bit about some of them. One of them was show up and be present. I feel like we've given some good attention to that already. Presence as core capacity, and yet there's a whole lot more to explore there. The second one from Angeles was pay attention to what has heart and meaning for you. I find that when I'm working with people, one of the favorite questions that I like to ask people is, what has your attention? And when people are able to speak about the seemingly unrelated stuff even, about what has their attention, that it helps them show up. And if it helps them show up, then there's a pretty good chance that more of us are showing up. Being able to create deliberateness of engagement around the things that really are holding our attention, it seems to be good operating system advice for how to be human in these days, something like that. The third one from Angeles was speak your truth without blame or judgment. And this one has really been capturing my attention actually in the last little while. The notion of what it takes to be in a blame-free or less blame-oriented environment with one another. I realize I'm speaking the negative of that right now. Where I've gone in my learning with that is that, in order for me to not feel blame, actually let's back up to the complexity of the work that we're involved in. one of the hunches that I have is that in complexity, some of us can get frustrated, like plans don't work the way that we thought they should, or people are not on board in the way that we thought they would, or people don't show up to the meetings that we're offering in the way that we of course think that they should or would naturally come to. It's easy in complexity, I find, for any of us, I can find it in myself as human beings, to go to a kind of blame. And the insight for me recently has been, we can't blame each other for complexity. We can't blame each other for, we may want to, by the way, but we can't really blame each other for collapsing economies or crazy healthcare systems or ridiculous politics or the ridiculous, I'm putting too much value on that. I can't help it, I suppose. Crazy use of resources for the energy supplies that we need in the world, in the earth, or from the earth. It's easy to go to a place of blame. If I back this down a little bit into a personal level, there's something about how any of us can find the place in ourselves where we might do exactly what the people we're blaming are doing, if that makes sense. I don't like what somebody's doing, and I can put a lot of energy into some great indignant, righteous indignation about what the person's doing. But the truth is, I can probably find the place in me where I might be equally inattentive to the person I'm judging, or equally silly, equally uninformed, equally uncommitted. I can find those places in me. Maybe not in those same circumstances, but chances are as a human being, because those things are widely shared, we can find them in ourselves. So the piece that I'm pointing towards here is, if we want to develop our capacity to speak our truths and without blame or judgment, as much as I want to wave the magic wand and have that happen right now, the best thing that I've found for that is, can I slow down enough to recognize and honestly with myself say, I can find the place where I might do something similar. I may not decide to do that all of the time, but it's still in me. I love the place of getting to compassion that relates to blame-free. The last one that Anjali speaks is be open, not attached to the outcome. Be open, not attached to the outcome. To me, this relates to some of what I was speaking earlier in the call about emergence. It's one thing to go into a meeting and for the best of reasons and intentions, decide that we've already got the answer. It's different to welcome a surprise that comes in. It's connected to me in some ways too, like some of you will be involved in, hey, we need to make choices, and hey, we're trying to choose a strategy here. You'll be involved in that kind of work, and the notion here is that the strategy, the best strategy, isn't one objective thing out there. It's actually what we can get ourselves behind. So the right strategy is the one that we can find ourselves in and engage ourselves in. There's a lot of depth that comes from the Fourfold Way as I hear it and experience it and live it in some way that Anjali Varian speaks and spoke. She died a little more than a year ago. I want to go into another short period of silence, and with the same kind of question for those of you who feel a sparking of how you connect to the Fourfold Way, or the things that I've just spoken here in relation to leaderful community. When have you experienced these kinds of principles supporting and strengthening your experience of a leaderful community? I'll watch the timer. The same technology works here. And Caroline can bring us back in. as before, is there a story or two to be heard from you, those of you who have joined into the call, the 45-second to 1 minute version of where you've seen principles like these, Angeles, Arian, and the Fourfold Way, strengthen and support Leaderful community?
And I invite you to press 1 on your keypads. And Tenneson, I was wondering if you might just review those principles again so people that are listening and not seeing just have them all refreshed.
Sure. Show up, be present is number 1. Pay attention to what has heart and meaning for you is number 2. Number 3 is speak your truth without blame or judgment. And number 4 is be open and not attached to the outcome. Be open, not attached to the outcome.
Thank you. We have Suzanne again with your hand up, and invite others as well to press 1 on your keypad. Here you go, Suzanne.
Okay, thank you. I particularly, I think, plugged into the third one. I was a facilitator of a group in which we used the U process, initiated by Peter Senge, and we were to make a decision, which was a very touchy decision. And I noticed that this has to do with the third and fourth, actually, but when people spoke the truth, for some of us, because we were at a deeper place and we were really listening to each other, we were able to hear people who had a different perspective than we did. And that together then we could arrive at and collaborate together through a whole process of consensus at a resolution which was, in the long run, satisfying to everybody. Thank you.
Thank you as well, Suzanne. David Wimberly, go ahead.
Yes. I've noticed this a few times when I've been presenting this movie called The Wisdom to Survive, Climate Change, Capitalism, and Community. When I'm using this approach, that there's an incredible deepening of the effects from the movie, and then people take leadership. They take personal connection with it rather than just having listened to something and walk away from it. And I find that that's very, very powerful and different. And it's also kind of hard for many people to really understand the difference between just showing a movie and doing a group process with it where everyone gets to speak.
Thank you. And if anyone else wants to chime in with a short story from your experience, please do. And not seeing any others right now, Tenneson, it's back to you.
Yeah, let me just ask a little follow-up there, David, in what you described, taking personal leadership. Was there a particular example that you could name or offer of the kind of personal leadership that showed up when you did it that way?
Well, there were more people that also wanted to show the film and have more discussions about it. There were people who were more interested and realizing the power of doing the community-based working with it instead of just a showing and maybe a few people raising their hands and asking questions, but actually doing group processes where everyone got to speak and no one was judged, and it was everyone even talked about the same thing in different groups again and again. They seem to be very much more energized and wanting to go out and do something rather than someone else doing it. That might have been it. The people really wanted to do something themselves and felt more empowered to do it themselves. And everyone's voice was the same in this, as opposed to when you just raised your hand and someone asked questions and you had that discussion. But I have a question that maybe this might not be the right place in this process, but maybe you want to do it later. And that's I keep on running into people that are community leaders, but they're afraid of the group process. They want to control it again and again and again. So they'll call it open space or open cafe, and then they'll want to narrow down the topics and narrow down the people, and they won't want to do repeats, and they jump in with so many edits of it. It just shows that they're completely missing the opportunity, and they kind of destroy the possibilities of it. And so how to help community leaders in planning programs to feel more confident, to be able to include these processes and not to edit them down and make them too much like what they're already used to. Have a little more courage or understanding. Anyway, that's something I'm struggling with a lot right now.
Yeah. I'll give a little attention to that in just a minute, David.
Thank you.
Because we're going to talk a little bit about open space right now. The reflection back in terms of what you and Suzanne have shared and what others might be thinking also is the way that I experience the context that you described is that sometimes people will say, in surprise, wow, there's a lot of trust here. Because people have some fears, and rightfully so, of course, sometimes, around what's the environment going to be and how are we going to gather together. So a lot of times I hear the feedback that says, I'm surprised at how you created such a safe place or such a trusting place. And if I'm honest, I don't know if I was really deliberately trying to create the safe space or to create the trusting space. I'm glad it was there. Mostly I was just trying to get us to be a little bit more in that human-to-human quality with one another. So in the principles that Anjali's names or in the previous piece we're speaking about presence, my experience is that human beings, if they get to show up and in just the most minimal of conditions get to be a bit more authentic or a bit more held in a listening environment, just a bit more of those things, that the impact is quite strong. And in the story I tell myself, what I want to believe is that because we're being that way with one another, or trying to be that way with one another, inviting it, there's an awakening that happens. And in that awakening, you get the kind of stuff like you were describing, David, of people want to do stuff. Like they just have enough of a spark in that moment to say, I'm going to try this, or I'm going to do this, or I'm going to call up my friend and we're going to do this together. That to me helps contribute to that feeling of leaderful. Let me shift us into, it's a bridge from what you just spoke, David, around open space technology. The first part up until now in the call here, we've really been looking at how change happens, which is a pretty big question, how change happens, and knowing that some of that happens at the belief level, right? We have to check and challenge our own beliefs, our own assumptions, and these are, as my friend and colleague Chris Corrigan likes to say, these are not finish line kinds of things. We continually come back to these. We don't do them once and check them off and then say done. Beliefs matter, and being able to get to them matters. It also matters that we can bring it down a little bit into, okay, so what's a more clear to-do list or an operating system, if you will, for being able to be in leaderful ways with one another. This is where, in the conversations that I had with Jeff, I'm kind of smiling right now and missing him also, because at one point he just said, we probably shared this with each other, but he says, this is an obsession. I was asking him, how would you speak about open space technology in 10 minutes? And we kind of smiled at each other and said, well, how do you speak about an obsession that you have in 10 minutes? Our context for sharing open space technology was, this is one of the ways to operationalize this good human-to-human stuff with one another and in a self-organizing way. So some of you have, I imagine most of you have experienced open space technology in many forms, and maybe even some in the way that, David, you've described, where people are meddling perhaps a little too much in what's going on there and shaping it a little too much. There are a lot of ways to do that. But the one-liner that I like to hold with open space technology as a way of operationalizing all this stuff is that it's the fastest way that I know to put people to work, and yet consistent with these principles of, working with networks, working with teams, working in self-organized ways, working with surprise, working with unknowable futures. It's like a learning operating system to come back to again and again and again. So this isn't, in this phone call, it's not the context of, well, how do you do open space? But we can point to a few things that really seem to help with that. One of the, let's see, where was I going to go with that? Open space as an operating system. When I've done open space, so the idea is self-organized working groups. We get to name them in community bulletin board style, if you will, and people get to work on the stuff that they want to work on and invite other people who are naturally drawn to work on those things together. Great, good, this is cool. One of the things that I've noticed with open space technology is that sometimes people feel what I would almost call a kind of freedom shock. Like if people are accustomed to working, especially in larger organizations where permission is needed most of the time and for very small things, when people are invited to work in open space, they kind of get shocked. Like, no, really, you can name your own topic that you want to talk about because it means something to you, and people will hesitate sometimes and feel like they can't quite fully jump into that. They can't quite it's as if, can't quite emotionally grasp the freedom to be able to do that. With open space, the way that I feel it with really a lot of the participative methodologies that I get to use, open space, circle, World Cafe, appreciative inquiry, these are 4 big ones for me. At one level, they're like 3 things at the same time. And I'll come back to open space for a minute. Open space is at one level a technology, a way to get people interacting and engaging with one another, a way to get people working together with one another from a platform of what do you feel is important, what do you feel passionate for, what do you love. That's pretty cool. At another level, open space or open space technology is a way of being. So it doesn't just apply to, great, we had a meeting last night about alternative energy sources, or we had a meeting about how we're going to implement further the community transition program or the transition streets program. It's a way of being in the world, and that way of being, I think, can be more succinctly defined by the principles that are held in open space. The third level that I was going to go to was that with each of these, tends to be a global community of practitioners who are trying to figure stuff out, who are trying to use this stuff and improve it and work with it and refine it and offer it in its simplicity to help things happen. We've got big dreams in the world, just like the group last night that I was working with. We've got big dreams, and open space is a way for us to practice, realize, do, accomplish, something like that. Jeff had some words around this. I think it was related to both Angeli's and open space technology about needing a simple and robust way of walking in the world. A one simple and robust way of walking in the world is let's go to these principles of open space. For those of you that have the handout, it's on there. Typically there's 4. I noticed that Jeff has added in a 5th here that makes a lot of sense to me. The idea is that one of the principles of open space. Whoever comes are the right people. And I want to invite some thinking about this just in the way that open space is the principles in open space are, to me, principles of freedom that help us to do good work together and be smart together and be kinder together, etc. So whoever comes are the right people. For those of you who have done open space, sometimes it turns out that the people that you most wanted to come to your group don't. Or the people that you think most should be involved there don't show up because they've got interest somewhere else or they don't have the interest in the moment. Whoever comes are the right people. I love the line from Harrison Owen or the way that he described this once when I got to be with him, which was, I'd rather have 3 people that give a damn than 50 that don't, that gather together. So something about the operating principle of life, in other words, whoever comes are the right people, can we welcome ourselves to working with what's in front of us when 3 people show up at the meeting we thought there would be 20, or when, for that matter, 20, 30 people show up at the meeting when we thought there would be 5. That kind of stuff. Whoever comes are the right people. Whenever it starts is the right time. To me, this is an invitation to kind of be in the ongoing awareness or the attentiveness or the even respondability to say, respondability, to say something important is happening here. I think we should move our energy, or I want to move my energy into what's unfolding here. Whenever it starts is the right time. It doesn't always start just because we have an agenda that says it's supposed to start right now. Life tends not to work that way. Things happen, and we're called to respond when right timing shows up. The corollary to that is when it's over, it's over. It feels like it's another time reference thing. Most of us, live in a pretty scheduled agenda culture where sometimes when the meeting's done, we can feel that it's done or we've done everything that we need to do, and yet we keep trying to stretch it out like we've got the hour to fill, we've got 2 hours to fill. This project is supposed to take 6 months. What do you mean we're done at 2? Or we're done the parts that we learned need to take place just within 2 months. When it's over, it's over. We don't need to linger on with something. What happens, a 4th principle here, is whatever happens is the only thing that could have. This again is an invitation for welcoming these. I think this is a deep commitment actually to emergence. Whatever happened with that group of people, it may not be the perfect thing and it may not be what you expected or what you wanted, but it did happen, and it happened with people who cared or who cared enough to show up. So to me there's a deep principle of welcoming surprise and emergence when we can go into this open space piece of whatever happens is the only thing that could have. The one that Jeff added in is wherever it happens is the right place. That means that meetings can happen in many places, or conversations can happen in many places. And yep, sometimes the conversations happen when the meeting is done and everybody leaves, and that's when people really start talking. I'd like to think that we're building a culture making with one another, and this applies deeply within transition and resilience-related efforts, that we're able to adopt these kinds of principles, whether it's in formal open space or not. That's not the point that I'm naming. But we're able to adopt these kinds of principles so that without necessarily deliberately structuring in Leaderful training 2.0, we've just got principles that we're inviting everybody to enact and everybody to embody more deeply. Open space is the best thing that I know that as a way of being or as a way of living enables us to come into some really strong partnering, peer-based, passion-based, honesty-based also. This isn't just about sunshine, but honesty-based tough things that we're working with that invite out the best of talents and abilities from many, many people. Let me stop there, I think. And at this point, we're going to do just a little bit of silence again. So I've said a lot of words. And what I want to invite coming out of the silence with awareness of the time that we have right now is, are there particular questions or insights that you want to speak in front of the whole group here that pertain to, yes, open space and leaderful communities, or really any of the things that have happened in this call? I'm going to do just a little shorter period, and then we'll come back for that. Okay, cool. Carolyn.
Yes. We ready for a few questions?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So a few questions or comments, and then we'll wrap up for today. So pressing 1 on your keypad just to participate today with a piece of yourself. So Kitty, go ahead.
Okay. I have joined a group called Build CASA. CASA, Court-Appointed Special Advocate for Children. The idea is to support the people who are supporting the children in our county. Now, what's concerning me, I think, this will be the 3rd meeting I've gone to. The first meeting was to ask people who showed up, the show-up part, whether they wanted to be on the board. And I thought, well, for me, I didn't, because I don't even know what the board is and what are we doing. But the thing that put me off is what I was hearing, rushing to projects and oh, by the way, the reason it has been going on, this group, but it sort of dissolved to 3 people, and they wanted more people to be part of it, and just kind of like reestablish this group, and so but my biggest concern was that I was hearing judgments and like your ideas, not necessarily mine, but people and mine too, not, and I thought, I don't know then about the group, and I don't know, so that's my concern. So how to, but I'm going back tonight for the next meeting. Okay, so that's my story, and any help or any thoughts would be appreciated. Thank you.
I think what I heard in that, Kitty, was echo. I think there was something about. Are you getting an echo, Caroline? Can you hear that? Okay, we're going to try it anyway here. What I heard in that, Kitty, is there's something about how, like, what am I signing up for? And wait a minute, there's an absence of clarity there. You might be in the position where you're able to shape how that conversation/meeting happens, and it might be one that you're just participating in. What I find is that even though it sounds ultimately simple and like ground we've already covered before, if I back people up and myself into the question of what is it that I really care about here, or why does this group even exist? And in your case, you might get into some pretty good stories about caring for kids and what's been needed. or some pain stories or some success stories, if I back up into a question around purpose, usually what I find is, even though sometimes people are feeling like we've already covered that ground, or we don't have time for that, we only have so much time for this meeting, by the time we've heard even just some people speak honestly about why it matters to them, it's like the energy of the room or the energy of the meeting has changed, has been transformed. Suddenly, instead of, I don't want to over-dramatize it here, instead of talking about filling spots on the board, we've reanimated and reconnected people back to, here's what I really care about here. And when people get to what they really care about, then it's like the room has come alive again. So people are feeling like, I want to commit, in the way that perhaps David was describing earlier in the call also. I just want to do stuff because this is a place where we can be real with one another. There's some of that, I think, that shows up. I'll stop there.
And there are no other hands up, so and we are at the allotted time that we set for ourselves, Tenneson. And just wanted to ask you for any closing thoughts or comments.
Mm-hmm. There was something in David's earlier question that I wanted to come back to. I know that sometimes people are afraid of the process, and I rely a lot, personally, David, I rely a lot on just being transparent with what some of the choices are and really trying to link it back to, hey, here's our purpose, and we have choices about how we go about doing it. In your example, I think that you were naming open space is one of the ways to do this, and it's important for us to hold integrity to that project and process, or to that process. There's no guarantee, but wanting to be able to just be honest and transparent about it and not hold their fears. Like, even just bring out and speak to some of their fears can be a very helpful thing. I imagine you doing some of that. In terms of today, it's just been fun to be in these thoughts and to bring them forward. I hope they stir something in you that maybe at the big level, at the high level, and also come back down to the level of, look, we're trying to do good work in our local communities, and something about inviting more humanness with one another tends to create more leaders, i.e. people who want to help with one another. My hope and wish would be that in the midst of all of this, you find what's simple for you and just do it. Just try it. The shameless plug would be on my website, which you have probably from your confirmation. I have a blog that I do Monday through Thursdays called Human to Human, and there's a lot of stuff in there that is everything about participative leadership and some of those deeply human aspects of that. I welcome you to come peek. Thanks, Carolyn.
Yeah, thank you so much, Tenneson. And Tennyson's website is Tenneson, Tenneson, Woolf, WOOLF.com. So do look for it there, and there's links on our website as well. And Tenneson, just a big thank you to you and your tireless work at helping people be more present and effective and, as you're saying, human, and just deeply appreciate all of your contribution to the transition efforts. So thank you so much.